G'day, folks. It's AOS Coach here, and I am going to be talking about all things Maggot of Nurgle today. Maggotkin of Nurgle. I don't know if you know this, but I actually used to type Maggotkin like with some weird H in there. I don't know. I realized in first edition, I'm like, wait a second, it's not Maggoth Lord. But I'm here with the disgusting, you can tell by the look of his face, the disgusting Tobias Kempf, who has been doing incredibly well with the Maggotkin of Nurgle. But something that really drew my attention was he has sworn not only to the grandfather's blessing, but he's also gone in and sworn to the Dark Prince Be'lakor. So we are going to talk about how he was spreading the grandfather's blessing across the Cherokee Open with his 4-1 performance. And I'm really curious to hear not just about Tobias, how you're seeing the Maggotkin of Nurgle, but I'm also very curious to hear how Be'lakor, an ally in, is changing a little bit to the list and what it's bringing to the table. Because I think we all love the Dartmaster unless he uses his little shenanigans on us. But why would you go outside the book? But before we get into all of that, we talk about rules and we talk about lists and we talk about the good stuff. Say good day to the internet. Welcome.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm just super excited to play the Maggotkin of Nurgle and to talk about my list here today and about how I'm playing the game. And yeah, thanks for having me.
No, it's absolute pleasure. And when I saw your list, when that list kind of came up, because I'll go in and look at Best Coast pairings and I'll look at Tabletop TO and I'll look at all the tournament lists, and I'm always curious about who's doing well and who's gone slightly off meta. And it's fascinating because, you know, when Nurgle very first come out, it was poo-pooed. Everyone was on the internet so angry about the book, and it wasn't just in my comment section. It was on other people's comment section, the Facebook pages. I had to tell my Discord people to chill out and just like see the forest from the trees, like chill out. And now they're okay. So I guess, Tobias, I want to hear from you initially. What got you into Nurgle? And I thought they were a terrible book. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So what got me into Nurgle were the models, and especially the demons. I just wanted to play Demons of Nurgle, and I've been playing AOS for a year and a half, and I've been playing ogres 100% of the time. Just I commit to an army and I play it. But I was I didn't have any more models I wanted to add to my army, so I started painting these Demons of Nurgle because the Great Unclean one is probably my favorite model in all of Warhammer, all of GW's models. So started painting them. Then I was about halfway through building a 2,000 point army, and they announced a new battle tome. I was like, great, you know, I've been reading this old battle tome, and I probably won't even have to play a game with it. And I got done painting the army about a week before the battle tome came out. You know, I had 2,300 points or so just of what I wanted to play, which were 30 Plague Bearers, the Great Unclean One, 7 Beasts of Nurgle, some characters, you know, and that's what I started with, because what I wanted to play were Beasts of Nurgle, just because I thought the models are amazing. There's amazing 3D printed, you know, proxies out there. So many cool conversions you can do on just like the 60 mil, you know, size type of model, and just put weird stuff together and call it a Beast of Nurgle. You know, I like modeling a lot. I like painting and all of that. And then I just pick an army and I try to do the best I can. You know, that's what I did with ogres. I take the models that I like and then I play them the way that I think they work best. And so when the book comes out, obviously I go before Fouling Host, because that's how you get to play all the Beasts of Nurgle, and you know, I went from there. Initially, I was like everyone else. I just did the math immediately on Plague Bearers because that's what I wanted to play. And yeah, I was super down on them. Super down on them.
People were upset, and it got to a point actually where, so I have a general rule on this channel, and that is I don't talk about a battle tome from like a list point of view until it's FAQ'd, because I've seen too many people get ahead of themselves. They talk about some crack science that they've come up with, only for it to be FAQ'd. And I'm conscious that people will come back to my videos 6 months, 12 months, 2 years after it's been recorded. And if I say, hey, Archelian King, take 3 Archelian Kings so you can flip the tide 3 times, do all these things. And then 2 weeks later, Games Workshop go, no, it's once per game. Yeah. And, the Nurgle trees was a perfect example where there was that big debate where it's like, do the feculent narmals multiply or are they just but there was a big discussion, right? Yeah. And I could have gone, oh, you do this crazy science and you'll get nine summoning points a turn and all these crazy stuff. And it's just inaccurate, right? So lots of people were really upset with Nurgle. And I remember people talking about Blight Kings, like, oh, Blight Kings are the worst. They're overcosted. I'm going to put this on the shelf. The army doesn't play like it used to. I'm not going to play Nurgle to begin with. Like, it was really negative. So what happened from that point, Tobias, that you've gone, well, I'm going to play with this army despite it being quote unquote trash? Well, and then kind of what have you learnt to get to a point where this quote unquote trash battle tome got you actually a pretty solid victory? You've gone 4-1. I'm sure you've got other good performances.
Yeah, so the army's done well for me, but and I just want to go back. The reason I was down on it is the math on Plague Bearers, just on Plague Bearers with the old host, Magnificent Wanderers. They're not as tough as they used to be, even though they have more wounds now. And I heard all these reviews saying, yeah, I think Plague Bearers is pretty good. I said, no, nobody's doing the math. They take more than 3 on. It depends on the profile, but on a hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, -1 rend, they take over 3 times as much as many wounds. So even wounds per point, they were less than twice as efficient as the old ones, as far as toughness with how far you could take them with saves and then re-rolling 6s to hit and all that. So I was really down on them. But the thing that got me playing was that, well, I just spent months painting this army, and I'm going to play it, whether it's good or bad, and I'm going to try to make it work. And the first few games, I noticed some things that were good about it that I hadn't anticipated. So you could really mess with people with a unit of 30 Plague Bearers. I've always played 30 from the beginning. I didn't go for the 20-10 that a lot of people recommended, because with 30 and with the Sloppity Valpiper, you can just do so many things. There's not one unit that's going to charge you and that's going to wipe you out, especially if you get that extra wound spell off with the Great Unclean One, which is one of the big reasons he's in this list. If the Plague Bearers went out, he's going out as well, because against Iron Jaws, Gargants, things like that can really chew through wounds, they usually don't have the magic defense, so you can get that spell off often enough, especially if there's arcane terrain somewhere. On a 6, that's pretty reasonable. And all of a sudden you have 90 wounds there with a 5-up, which is that's close to the same as 150 wounds to just chew through. And whether it's Maw Crushers, Kragnos, 2 Mega Gargant Gatebreakers, it doesn't matter. They're not killing that in a turn. So they just get stuck. And then if there's something that doesn't have 3-inch melee, it's just awful, because one thing will swing and you'll just remove casualties so that the other thing doesn't get anything because they can't pile in. And that is just awful. It just ruins someone's day.
And that's kind of what Germ's referring to. Like I had the pleasure recently of playing a couple of Nurgle games, and that Sloppity Barpiper, whether you bring it onto the list or you summon it in, if you build around the demons, he is an absolute nightmare unless you have a lot of attacks and you've got good range. Because if you're off range 1 or range 2, there's a good chance that you're right, when you start pulling back from combat, you can really pin someone in, and it can be kind of an absolute pain in the backside. But before we continue this, I want to call out this interesting comment, because Paul, friend of the channel, always commenting on the videos, and mentions that been playing Nurgle since Fantasy. This was probably one of the biggest changes that we noticed with Nurgle. Between battle tomes, you went from being a super fast army, you throw down the Feculent Narmor in the middle of the table, run up the board, get within the range, and then you could run and charge. The old rules, by the way, folks. Don't go looking at that. Don't go try doing that now. That used to be the trick. Now that's gone completely, and you have gone to a really slow army.
Yep.
How did that kind of play for you, Tobias? Have you noticed the impacts and what it even meant to you as a player?
Well, I didn't play the old Nurgle. I played ogres who were fast. So, but that added on top of my negativity, because I told you, plague bearers aren't as tough as they used to be per point. They're not as fast. They're not nearly as fast as they used to be. And on top of that, they do less damage because you could have so many, mortal wound triggers and things like that. So to me, it was like, well, you're slower, you do less damage, and you're less tanky. You're just worse. But the way the army plays is very interesting, because what you have to do, you don't get to position your army based on your opponent. First of all, you're going to be 1 or 2 drops based on what list you're playing. And then you got to look at the terrain, and you got to put your models where they have to be for objectives. Because 4 inches, you can't go there later. You have to go as close as you can to the objective, and then you have to run on it. So almost every game, I auto advance or I auto run my Plague Bearer 6 so that they get that 10-inch move, and then I really hope that someone moves within 9 inches of them, so that I can redeploy them further up the board, because that's all I want. I don't care about how many you're killing. I just want them to be on that freaking point and hold it. And that's really the playstyle. And the beasts of Nurgle help out a little bit because they can be fast. I used to play a unit of 3 just to be able to auto run them 6 on the first turn, and then maybe get a cheeky charge off on the first turn. But the Plague Bears are just better, and then having units of 1 Beast of Nurgle is also better. Falling back, charging again, and then again Be'lakor. On those missions, Maggotkin to me are a lot better on missions with 3 central objectives. If your opponent can just hang back and score while staying on their side of the board, it's a lot harder. But again, Be'lakor helps a lot, because if you go fight in the middle, Be'lakor can just stay at the back somewhere where he's protected turn 1, and then advance up the board, and then turn 2 he'll charge one of their small units that they left at the back, some liberators or whatever it is, and fight them. And he can kill that, because he can't kill a lot, but he can kill whatever 100-point objective holder unit they left back to hold an objective. So he gives you a little bit of flexibility that is useful.
A lot to unpack there, and we will get into Tobias's list. And I can see that the king of Legion of the First Prince is in the chat here, Sean, who I'll be talking to next week, by the way. So he loves his Be'lakor. We've got some Fury-licious chats going on next week. But let's go back to Nurgle for a second before we bring in and kind of talk about what Be'lakor brings to the table, because Be'lakor is great. And it's funny because Be'lakor had the same type of experience. Be'lakor used to be quote unquote better when it was less points. His rules were changed, and people initially again started poo-pooing on Be'lakor when he got the new model, the new war scroll, the new points, and people started going, well, he's not really worth taking anymore. And I think the internet realized very quickly that he's still a great utility piece and synergizes quite well with both what Chaos wants to do, but Nurgle wants to do. You are less about being offensive. You are less about smash, smash, smash. You are about the grind. You are about the 5 battle rounds. You are about denying battle tactics. You are about sitting on an objective and saying, throw as much damage at me as possible. Good luck to you lifting me off the board, because you can take that absolute punch. So what do you think Nurgle does really well?
Well, yeah.
Did I just answer your question?
That's yeah. I mean, you summarize a lot of it, but yeah, they play a 5-round game, and it was a big change for me, because I went to an event, a 3-day event, but once, where my first game was 45 minutes with the ogres. My second game was 1 hour, and then the last game was 1 hour and 15 minutes. So I did 3 games in 3 hours, And Nurgle doesn't play that. I've gone to time a couple of times. At Cherokee, my first game was against Nurgle, so we got to round 3. That was slow and painful, and so you do have to play the long game. And your strategy, looking at the Legion's abilities and everything, your strategy is just make it slow, make it painful. Just hold the objectives and score the points, and don't let your opponent do anything. And like I said, if 2 Maw Crushers charge you and you lose 6 Plague Bearers, and the second Maw Crusher doesn't do anything, that Orc player is going to be very, very disappointed. And so that's what you're doing. You're just making it as slow and painful as you can for your opponent.
Well, it's interesting actually you called that out, because a lot of players are playing against the one drop, right? They're building around Battle Regiment. They're trying to go first. And you are seeing more games not go to time. A lot of games are really wrapping up by turn 3. At least, you kind of know that most of the opponent's been lifted, or the VP's difference is too great to come back from. How are you finding the long game? Because that's what most people don't want to play. They're building towards doing as much damage to you as possible between turn 1, turn 2, and maybe turn 3, and probably aren't preparing for the long game.
Yeah,
they're burning the good battle tactics.
No, you're right, and that's what makes Maggotkin good in this meta, I think. Oh, you were right.
How about you go out and quickly get yourself a drink, and I'm going to bring up the rules, and we'll talk a bit about the rules in a second. Go get yourself a drink. I told him to go get a drink, but in the meantime, it's all good. It's all good. I'm going to bring up the Maggotkin of Nurgle rules, and while Tobias go get a drink, I'll talk about some of the key things, right? And Nurgle's playstyle fundamentally changed from being this ultra-aggressive, fast army to something that is a lot slower, a lot more of a grind, and is going to play, again, that long game. And one of the things for me that I really enjoyed is the fact that you can deny battle tactics probably better than anyone else. When someone picks Slay the Warlord, Broken Ranks, Monstrous Takeover, it can be really hard against Nurgle because you've got this 5-up ward save across the board. In the past, Nurgle demons were the only ones who got the ward. Mortals didn't have a ward. Now your Plague Bearers, as well as your Blight Kings, your Pusgoyles, all of those are going to get a ward save. But also you've got this game of attrition, right? You've got the disease weapons doing chip mortal wounds at the end of every battle round or every turn. You can up a bunch of tokens, and you deal some mortal wounds based off the amount of tokens you've been given out. And the wheel, the way that the wheel can really stop piling and shenanigans, it's very much about a slow grind denial style game. Tobias, did I buy you enough time to get yourself a drink and rest your throat?
Absolutely. Yeah, you were right. I was dumb to ignore you. So yeah, what you were saying, I've been thinking that as well. One of the reasons that my list works, because I'm still on kind of, and people give me shit for this because I don't lose games, but I'm still there. There's nothing exciting in this book, everything is kind of average. But one of the things that helps me is people just having lists that try to go all out, right? You try to win by turn 2 and just run in there, and it just doesn't work against Nurgle. It doesn't matter what melee monster you have. Plague Bearers, especially because I try to go first. I try to go first many games. If I go there and I have 90 wounds of Plague Bearers with a 5-up ward, you're not killing them, because same for fulminators, whatever. I'm gonna deploy them in an annoying way where you only get 2 fulminators in. You're not killing them, and then you're gonna run out of steam, and that's how Nurgle wins.
Yeah, and that's what you realize quickly is, through the attrition and through the grind, people will throw down their finest hour. They'll throw their buffs in. They will go hard, and you're right. One of the biggest problems that Nurgle can face is getting pinned in their own home objective. If they get pinned in the deployment, because you're slow, you'll find that, yes, you'll take the punch, but you won't be scoring the objectives. And depending on the type of build, and you've got some flexibility. If you need to get some movement shenanigans, you've got, the Lord of Affliction, you've got some teleporty Nurglings, you've got what else have you got? You've obviously got summoning and things like that, but you're not generally a fast army. So once you're stuck, you're stuck. So if you can get onto the objectives early, you will sit there, you'll grind it out, you'll take the punch, and you'll just keep scoring. But then there's also some interesting counterplay through the Glotkin. So it's very much a control style army.
Yep.
It's very much about someone who likes to counterplay their opponent, manipulate the board, and it's not really for someone who wants to go turn one aggressive and just, you're not an Einjaws player. I think that's probably the key.
Yeah. And then the other thing that helps you is that a lot of people think that they want the double turn so that they can double turn you. And they want you to go first, which I want to go up, I want to go up first anyway. So I'm happy. The only time I don't want to go first is if I'm playing magic heavy armies that have 18-inch range on all their spells and that aren't going to pin me in my deployment zone, because that is one of the big weak points of my list. And so then I'm not worried about them pinning me, and I'm just going to be out of range of their spells. So I'm happy going first. You think you want to go second, and then you find out you don't want to, especially, and again, that makes it worse. Be'lakor makes, the opponent going on the double turn. I will often give someone the double turn if I go first and then they go second, and your Kragnos doesn't do anything. Oh, I win the roll off. Well, you know what? He's not going to do anything for another turn, and it's the god of despair. It just makes everyone feel terrible about themselves.
Couple of quick things. First off, AOS old man, aka Mike from Atlanta, calling out how amazing you are. You're an awesome player. And Frederick in the chat saying that you have an amazing Great Unclean One. Well, do I have something prepared for you already just to show off? Here is your Great Unclean One, your Beast of Nurgle, as well as your Be'lakor. So a little bit of your own. I don't know if you want to describe or kind of give me a bit of what I'm looking at here.
I mean, that's just, I love painting, and that's that's how I got Be'lakor on my list, because I got that model on my table, and I wanted to paint him, frankly. And then after I painted him, I wanted to try to play him. I just felt he fit perfectly into that slow down the game, make it miserable, make it last as long as possible for your opponent, and he just fit in that play style and worked really well with Nurgle, and we'll talk more about that later. But
and your Beasts of Nurgle are absolutely extraordinary. I'm loving. They look disgusting. They also look filthy. They just look just dig it.
Thank you.
So that's cool. No, really, really good job. So we talked a little bit about Nurgle. We talked about what it does really well, and we kind of now understand, if you haven't already picked up this battle tome and experienced it for yourself, the play style of the Force and what you're really good at. Let's add that extra level of Be'lakor, because I think that's probably one that, even like Gravon talking here, is you add Be'lakor as an ally. He's not a natural model in Nurgle. So he's a coalition unit. He's not generating you disease points, and you're not be getting disease stuff from Be'lakor. So why would you spend 400 odd points, like 360 points, on the Dartmaster? What does he add to what you've already got?
Well, so I mean, output is one of the weaknesses of Nurgle, and you have to play the long game, right? So like the disease points. First of all, they're unreliable. You're not sure. It's at the end of the turn. You don't know how much damage you're going to do. The damage happens at the end, so it doesn't prevent anyone from swinging. You don't have anything fast that can get where it needs to be, deliver damage where it needs to be. I mean, your only things that really do some damage, in my list, the Great Unclean One, right, is very slow, and even his damage is somewhat unreliable. Glotkin lists are a little bit different, but anyway, so you don't do damage. So when someone punches you, you might you might not be done. But what most armies do, they try to screen, get punched, and then punch back. Well, with Nurgle, the punch back is very weak, almost inexistent sometimes. So one of the things that is dangerous to you is just something that will smash into your lines and just start killing things, so that your army will be gone faster than you can respond. Because those two gate breakers that I was talking about, well, if they double turn you and start swinging the plague bearers in 2 rounds of combat, you know what? They might kill all those plague bearers. And if they get into beasts of Nurgle, that's even worse. They're going to take those. They're going to pick those beasts of Nurgle up, and you're not going to get your charges. Or if it's 2 cabbages, I mean, if there's a smart player, he's not going to charge your plague bearers. He's going to run around and he can charge whatever he likes, and he will kill all of your beasts, whatever else you have, and you'll just lose the game. So what you have to do is slow down the game and give yourself time to respond. And so that's where Be'lakor comes in. And to me, it was very interesting when I watched your show about the mortal Nurgle side with the Glotkin, where he was talking about his tougher matchups being those very hitty melee characters. Because okay, you charge a Maw Crusher, but then I mean that he wants to be in melee. Okay, you charged him, but he's still happy. Even if you charge Kragnos, okay, well he didn't get his charge off, but I mean he's still happy. There's a lot of things that just want to smash you. If I see a Kragnos, I almost consider it an auto win. If I see a 600-point melee monster on the other side, I mean that's what Be'lakor loves, because you can prevent them from moving, charging, and fighting. Whereas in shooting your long strikes, Be'lakor is not that good at stopping long strikes. But if there's a melee monster that just wants to go and kill your army, Be'lakor slows them way down. And then what most people do is they just throw the rest of their army into you without that thing, and then you can respond to that, and it becomes a very different game. And just people can't deal with layering their threats like that.
So just to rewind really quickly, just because we kind of went into 2 things there. First off, Kragnos, wow. Good time. We were just talking about Kragnos. Which armies do Nurgle struggle against the most? Is it the melee, super offensive, lots of range, lots of damage, or what do you find is your toughest opponents?
So it depends on the list. I'll talk about the list that I've been running here. And in this list, it would be armies that just push you out in the objectives, because you're still not going to do that much damage. If you play 120 zombies with my list, I haven't played that matchup, but I don't think I can win it, because he's going to stand there and nobody's going to kill anyone, and he's just going to score the objectives every single turn. So
yeah, because you've got that's probably one thing I noticed a lot is that Nurgle's footprint on the board has really shrunk. The Great Unclean one and the Glotkin changed a lot. The Glotkin literally almost doubled in points. The Great Unclean one at least increased by about 1/3 of his points.
Yep.
You saw the Blight Kings go up in points. So all of a sudden, because everything kind of went up in points, you saw the army reduce its size significantly. And I guess depending on how you build it, right? You're not seeing the board. I remember back in the day, you'd see like a unit of 30 and then 20 plague bearers. You would, in a great unclean one, or you'd see the thrice fold battalion with 3 great unclean ones. You lose a lot by going in, and you don't have the board presence because you are super resilient. So I guess, people are asking like Justin, what about the fly spam lists? We are seeing a lot of good success coming off the back of like the Lord of Affliction, the Puskor Blight Lords, or even Plague Drones. But there are only 2 models.
Yeah.
So if you go into an elite force like that, to your point, you don't have a lot of bodies on the objectives. Yes, you'll take a punch, but on a pure scoring on the objective, if your opponent has lots of bodies or mega gargants that are counting for more, I guess that could be quite tough.
Yeah, it would be. So again, there's different lists you can play, but again, I think overall Nurgle struggles with bodies, and holding objectives. And yeah, if you had 3 Mega Gargants, you know, with a mission with 3 objectives in the middle, and they just moved, they had first turn, they moved up and barely touched those objectives and said, you go, man, that would be a tough game. You know, because I'm not going to get to them. It's going to take me a couple turns to get to them. And I'm probably not scoring anything during those 2 turns, you know. I mean, my battle tactics, but not on objectives. And then even once I get to them, removing those Gargants is going to be tough. And I can maybe contest one of the objectives if I put 30 Plague Bears on it, the Great Unclean one, something like that, you know. But it's going to be really, really tough. And yeah.
Yeah, and look, you know, and Gravon mentioning, you know, Puscoils are great. I really like Puscoils, and I love some of the abilities, but they don't count a lot on the objective, and it can be really tough. So I guess we're going to show off 2 of your versions, right? I know Tobias sent me like 5 lists. I'm like, brother, which ones are we going to talk about? Like, you know, you had a lot of great creativity, and I think for me, I'm excited because you are seeing books like Nurgle, like IDK, like Fire Slayers actually unlock some creativity, because in the past, what my experience with Nurgle was, it was all about Black Kings, it was all about Plague Bearers, it was all about Thricefold, and like you just swing constantly. It was never really a mix, and I'm now seeing a whole bunch of really good mixed lists.
Yep. So before we even get to that, one thing, because I've been saying a lot of negative things, that's just the German inside of me, you know. You just focus
You're
on
looking
the
for
problems.
efficiency in points.
Yeah, and just, you know, like the stuff that's good, you don't have to talk about it. That's just the way it's supposed to be. The stuff that you're not happy about, you have to focus on that. So the thing that is really amazing about this book is whatever models you like, you can make a list with those models, and you can make a dozen different lists, and you know, in one matchup, one list is going to be slightly better than the other, but overall, you know, there's not a best list. So the book is really good internal balance. I think there's maybe a couple of units that are a little bit worse, but overall, you can make very similar, or lists of very similar power with most of the units in this book, and you can have a lot of different, like a lot of variety within the book, and that is, I mean, that's something awesome also for just someone that wants to collect, you know, arrange, wants to focus on one army. You can make a lot of different lists with this book, and they're all very good. Having played Be'lakor, I'm very partial to having Be'lakor in there because I think he resolves so many problems that the book has overall, and helps with those. But yeah, we can look at some of those lists, and that is definitely an exciting part of the book and a fun part, you know, especially with how easy building lists is in AOS compared to 40k. I just made a couple of 40k lists. Oh god, it feels like building an IKEA shelf. It's awful. AOS is awesome for that.
Well, anyone who's listened to my video at Daughters of Cain has saw my frustrations, because I wanted to build around witch elves, and right now it's just snakes. Like everyone's just doing snakes, and I can't wait for the other side of the book to be re-unlocked. To Paul's point as well, like I think one thing that's really interesting is your strength in spell casting is quite low, and you know, while the Plague Bearers, is it the resiliency spell that gives them the +1 wound, sounds really good. Fleshy Abundance sounds really good. It can be quite tough to cast. And I know you got the Rotbringer Coven, which is an interest. I don't know what your thoughts are on the Rotbringer Coven. I think it's a good idea, but
you don't have
I don't
spells.
know if I want to...
You don't have spells that are worth casting, you know. So, I mean, not that you want to invest that many points into it. And then Nurgle isn't that good on spell casting, but like I said, you know, 7. It's more than half the time, especially if there's arcane terrain close by, you know, you'll get it off. And then the armies that will prevent you from getting it off are the armies that you don't really need it against, right? Because they don't do that kind of damage output. Like if you're playing Tzeentch or Lumineth, you know, you don't need 3 wound Plague Bears. 2 wounds are going to be plenty. It's when you play Iron Jaws that you want those 3 wound Plague Bears.
One of the abilities we kind of talked a little bit about, I just want to just tap into it a little bit longer, is the Be'lakor Dartmaster rule. And this is one of the many reasons why you take Be'lakor. Be'lakor doesn't get to ignore, you know, save modifiers. So you can't plus or minus, so ignores rend. has, you know, a double caster, has a good spell called Enfeebling Foe, will heal if someone takes a battle shock test and fails. I'll rely too much on that one. But the Dartmaster, which is the ability that everyone kind of taps into, I want to kind of explore that a little further, because you explained some of the units that are quite good, but then you mentioned things like long strikes you don't get a lot of value from. So I just want to talk at the rule first for anyone who hasn't seen it, and then unpack it a little further. So once per battle at the start of the enemy hero phase, you pick one enemy unit on the battlefield. Until the next hero phase, at the start of each phase, including the phase that it was picked, so hero, movement, shooting, blah, 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 you roll the dice. And on a 3+, that unit cannot move, shoot, fight, use command abilities, chant prayers, cast a spell, dispel endless spells, or unbind spells. So that's why you're paying 360 points, because you're trying to stop someone from doing something.
Yep.
What is it you're trying to stop? And what are the types of units that could be a trap that it sounds good to stop them, but maybe is not getting you that value of that once per battle? Now, this is generic, right? You know, you might want to shut down long strikes if that's the only threat option on the table. Maybe your opponent didn't take dragons or fulminators or something.
Yep.
But just overarching, help me make some decisions. What are good options for Dartmaster, and what are like lesser options?
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit. The best options for Dartmaster are just melee units. So expensive melee units, expensive hammers that want to move up, charge you, and then fight. Because that means you get 3 chances to mess them up. So it's really a 1 in 27 chance that, you know, they get to do what they want to do. And even, I mean, it's a high risk, because if they get to move and charge and then not fight, it would be disastrous for a lot of units. So if
we're talking like mega gargants,
yeah.
we're talking dragons, we're talking
fulminators,
talking more crushers, we're talking anything that wants to get in and has multiple, you know, all of these things we're talking about does have a shooting attack, does have a movement attack, might have a spell cast, will probably want to use command abilities in some description.
Kragnos is the big one that people like to play right now, and I mean, it's awful. 720 points of your list that doesn't do much. You might get the 3d6 charge aura out of him, you know, for some other units, but yeah, if Kragnos doesn't do anything for 2 turns, then yeah, you're probably not having the game that you were planning on having. So it's really good. Then yeah.
So, and if you get double, and probably the other call that you just mentioned, the 2 turns, is it happens at the start of the enemy phase, and the ability applies until your next hero phase. So if you get double turned, that means you're going to get additional time where something is going to be on a 3-up, not doing its thing.
That's right.
Have you found that opponents will give away the turn just to get rid of that ability?
No, I mean, for them, yeah, I haven't seen that, but I've had the opportunity to do it a few times and give them the turn, and it's been very good. I don't always do it. It depends on the game state, right? But if you're in a place where you're holding objectives and they need Kragnos or whatever it is to change the game state, then you're just happy staying where you're at. You know, they don't get to activate their 600 point model or whatever, and the game continues to swing in your favor during their turn, or maybe just slightly in their favor, and then it's your turn to go, and then it might be your turn to go again. So, you know, it's incredible like that, and a lot of armies do want to double turn you, and the double turn remains dangerous even for Nurgle, but Be'lakor makes it less dangerous in those situations. So he just makes your game a lot more reliable and safer. Because I mean, how many games did you lose because, well, you know, you were forced to go first, and then Ironjaw's double turned you, or, you know, Ogres and Kragnos double turned you, and you just feel like you couldn't. There's little you could have done, because you can screen for 1 turn, but then if they get to go again, you know, after going through your screens, there's not much you can do against certain armies. Well, Be'lakor changes that, and that's that makes your game plan very consistent. I'm rarely worried about who's going to win the roll off. I'm usually like, I'd slightly like to win it or lose or whatever. It's it's not a big difference to me most of the time. So it's a strange feeling during the first 2-3 turns.
What about your supercasters? Let's say Nagash, Kragnos, Teclis, Lord of Change. Are these also good options to Dartmaster?
Yeah, so I've only played them a couple times, and I've not played Nagash. I've played Teclis twice, and one game it was actually Teclis going first. I was just, all right, Dartmaster, let's see. Oh, you don't do anything in the command phase. Well, that's too bad for you. And then I got to double turn him, so that was basically it. And it was is good too.
It's interesting, right? Because everyone has that, and I think this is the key, right? Is like, when do I apply Darkmaster and what do I want to use Darkmaster for? Is going to differ depending on the opponent. Everyone has their game plan, whether it is the Kragnos getting that 3d6 charge and people kind of deploy and set that up. Teclis, for example, you want the spells like Protection of Hish and Emerald Light Swarm and some of these other things to keep those 30 Sentinels off with the Lambert Light, and like everyone kind of has that, or the Marathi with the double shoot bow snakes. You want to shut down that command ability. Everyone has that ability. I guess it's what's going to get you the greatest return and what's going to protect you. Because you're right, the long strikes, that's based on a holy command, so that's just an ability. That's not even a command. So you've got a 3+ to stop one shooting attack compared to stopping a movement, stopping a command ability, stopping. Hell, you might not stop a charge, but if you get a 3+ on a charge, it means that they couldn't re-roll the charge, for example, right? Stonehorns, for example, will love that because they do mortal wounds on the charge. There's so many things you can play around with, which makes it interesting. But to Sean's point, every player only has 5 turns. So the way you mess around with it and you delay the game just plays down to the zone denial and the battle tactics scoring and all the things that you want to stop. So whether you take Be'lakor or not, Nurgle plays well in those places. And to Marcus, how many games go through the full 5? Well, guess what? Nurgle wants to play the full 5. Most people don't want to play the full 5. Most people aren't building towards first 5. And that gives you a significant advantage, because when your opponent throws everything at you and tries the best, and they throw their best battle tactic because they want to burn the game by turn 3, and it doesn't play that way, then they're scrambling for options in turn 4, turn 5, because they've gone elite. You've got the attrition on your side, and you've still got points on the board and battle tactics up your sleeve.
Yeah. And I've never, all the games that didn't last 5 turns is because someone threw everything into me and then the army died. Like, I've never gotten tabled in 5 turns in 25 games or so now. So Nurgle does play the 5 games, and that's been consistently true, especially with Be'lakor. I think plays a big round role in that, because those big monster models that could kill you don't do their job the way they're supposed to do it, and that is just a big.
Talk to me about the rules. Talk to me about the rules. While I originally brought this up to stall you, but when you look at the Nurgle rules, you've got the wheel, you've got the disease weapons, you've got disgusting resilience, you've got the locus of blah blah blah, the feculi, whatever. You can summon Nurgles, you can bring on plague bearers and trees, but then you've also got one of your lists, or your primary list was the befouling host, where you get to add the second feculent Narmor to the table.
Yep.
When you look at Nurgle and when you're building your lists, and you did give me like 5 lists, what is it you're building around? Are you trying to maximize disease and you're trying to put that 7 tokens on your opponent every single turn? Are you really trying to build around the D3 heals from the Great Unclean One, Horticulus, blah, blah, blah? Or are these some of these things that you're just kind of tapping into, and like what's your thinking here?
No, so none of the rules in this book are anything that you would build around, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. There's nothing really exciting that's worth building around. There's just a lot of small bonuses that are nice to have. The biggest thing is probably disease, because if you draw out the game and make it a slow game and everything is kind of in the middle, it will add up. Always, it's not reliable. It's not upfront damage that you can rely on to kill something that you want to die. But if you're just in the middle there and you're bringing a bunch of models in and you're just charging in with your 30 plague bearers and touching six enemy units, which I've done many times, and you just tie everything up and then you prevent it from piling in, so you're taking minimal damage back, and you're just piling on the disease points, you roll a couple of 6s here and there, and then everything ticks up by a couple of disease every turn, and that is definitely a big part of how you win games. And it's also important that you do get that started. So that's why Be'lakor, I won't always use the Dartmaster turn 1, because something I'm worried about is someone just saying, okay, fine, if Kragnos goes first and I Be'lakor him, he's like, all right, I'll hold my whole army back for a turn and I'll charge you turn 2, and then I'll still have you wipe off the board by turn 4 and I won the game. So you want to make sure that the enemy is engaged or the opponent is engaged, right? And that you start all those small things, rolling in. Beasts of Nurgle are just, like you said, that locust, so annoying because you charge them on different sides of a unit, then the opponent can't pile in. So there's only a few models swinging into them, so they lose 3 or 4 wounds, and then they heal again, and then they lose 3 or 4 wounds again, and they heal again, and all of a sudden these 8-point models or 8 wound models, just live so long, and you fall back and you charge. If you feel that one of them is in danger, it's just everything is annoying, but you're not building around anything in particular. Same for the summoning. Great, starting turn 2, you start getting a beast in. It might make its charge, probably not. So by turn 3, you have an extra beast, and then turn 4, an extra beast, and turn 5, an extra beast. But nothing that you can rely on, but all these small things that just help you. The longer the game goes, the better it is for you, and the worse it is for your opponent. So you just try to make it slow and painful and as unfun as possible for the opponent, and prevent all his toys from doing anything. Of course, you want your opponent to have fun, but that's just saying you don't want him to get to play the game that he wants to play, because you don't have an amazing game plan. You don't have amazing abilities that just are going to crush him. You just have to make sure he doesn't get to do what he wanted to do, and that's how Nurgle wins the game. That's really what I think. That's my philosophy behind the list.
You play a thinking person's game. That's really what you do. Whether you take the Glotkin for the counter charge, so you can charge in the enemy's charge phase, whether you have like Nurglings, for example, I hate Nurglings now. I used to think they were cute and funny. Now I hate them because, when you apply in Sloppity Biopiper, you pin someone in and get one model attacking. You don't kill the Nurgling. It then heals up at the end of the turn.
Yep.
It's like this bloody stupid Nurgling. I hate you so much. But I think, one of the things that I want to call out here and why I asked you the question is when Nurgle very first come out, I know a lot of people were thinking about disease tokens, going, right, I need to get the maximum disease tokens as early as possible. And people were talking about things like Sorceress Shackles and what are they doing, like the Umble Spell Portal. And I think it's the Rotbringer Coven that if you or the Sorcerers, that if they cast an endless spell, it gets the Maggotkin of Nurgle keyword, which then means that it can give off disease tokens. So is that a strategy that kind of plays out? I think the answer is no. Do I look at my units and look at what is the maximum things that could give me disease tokens? No. But they're nice additions to the army that, again, just plays the slow grind.
Yeah. And there's one thing you don't have on here, which is the wheel, which to me is the same thing. You can't play around it because you don't know what you're going to get. You can't manipulate it. But the wheel is actually powerful if you land on the right number. And
Yes.
You will play around it if you're... I love starting with a 4. If I roll a 4, and then that means they can't do heroic actions turn 1, and then turn 2, they don't get to pile in, and they get -1 to their charge. Now all of a sudden you have board-wide sloppity Piper action, and that is just, you can do some nasty things if you know that, and you charge in with your Beast of Nurgles in annoying ways, and you can just make someone not play the game. It's awful.
There you go. I brought it up
There
for
you
I
go.
brought it up for
Yep.
you. There you go. Something I did not prepare for early, but quickly adapted. And there's the Nurgle Wheel. And I think if you are coming from the old book to the new book, you'll notice that the wheel has changed, both what's on the wheel, but also you used to have far more control. And Tobias, the general feel that people feel like is that it's really like a 50-50. If you roll on 1, 2, or 3 to start the wheel, so the wheel is an environmental thing. You roll a dice to see where you start the cycle of corruption. If you land on like 1, 2, or 3, it's like a bit of an average start. But when you start landing on like 3, 4, 5, 6, and you know that's a good start, because you start looking at things like I think is it number 5, number 4, and number 4. It's stopping someone from using a rally or an inspiring presence is nasty. Being able to stop someone from doing a pile in and they've got to move further away is nasty. There's some good stuff in here.
Yeah, there is. My favorite one to start on is 4. Against some armies, it could be 5, but usually turn 1, you put the Sloppity in a way that everything's within 14. Turn 2, once you charge and so on, some things are going to be out, and so I'd rather have the no pile-in board wide on turn 2. And then turn 3, now everything's engaged and everything has disease on where they're at. Yeah, I can't see you.
That's right. I thought I'd just say hello to people while we're talking. It's a really good ability. I think the key though is that it's random as all hell. So
you can't rely on
don't look at the wheel. Yeah, don't look at the wheel and go, right, this is my plan. I'm going to get this and I do this. No, it's a beneficial when it lands.
Yeah, it's just you roll your dice and then you start thinking about how you can use it to mess with the game if you can. If you start on a 1, you can't do anything with it really. Like you just ignore that game, but it is what it is.
I forgot to ask you, by the way, do you have any Nurgling plushies? Like, do you have the plushie?
I don't have the plushie, no.
I've got a friend on TikTok who just makes, all he does is makes videos about the Nurgling. So, and he's not even a Nurgle player. He's just obsessed with that bloody plushie. And I think, Kyle, we kind of already talked about the matchup against Gargants. I think the challenge is that you can't lift the Gargant. You don't have the raw damage output of the Gargant.
Yeah.
You've got to play around it with your tactics and you've got some shenanigans, but you're not going to raw kill them.
Yeah, well, I mean, you will kill them. And when I was speaking about it earlier, Bellacore helps that matchup a lot. So, making one of the great gate breakers not do anything for a turn is great, especially Gargants with how big their bases are and how terrain is often set these days. I know they can ignore terrain, but with how big their base is, they can't. They still have to land on the other side of the terrain. If you block the guy that's in front, you might block 2 Gargants from getting on objectives that turn, and you feel a little bit bad about yourself when you block over 1,000 points in their deployment zone. It's really good. So.
I'm gonna bring up a question, then bring up your list at the same time, right? So Autumn asked a really good question. Actually, is if I was going to bring the Rotbringer Sorcerers, the Coven, is there any particular endless spells that you would prioritize over others? I've got a few ideas, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. Well, actually, I painted the Burning Head just because I had a list where I had 20 points left over. And Bellacore and the Great Unclean One together have more spells to cast than useful spells that they can cast. So, just a few extra mortal wounds would have been useful. And then I also painted the Gnashing Maws, whatever that one's called. Because for me, one of the main things I like endless spells for is blocking movement. Again, if you fail that Unbind, or some people forget that the heroic action can be to unbind something when they have a non-magic army, and you just put a big base that moves 3d6 and put it in an annoying spot, you can really mess with people. So, but otherwise I don't really have any that I think are that useful, because I also don't think the Coven is one of the most useful units in the book.
No, I think if I was going to do it, and I've mentioned this on a few videos with Nurgle, I love the Emerald Life Swarm, especially if you're going into like Plague Bearers. Like if you're going to have like 3 wound Plague Bearers, and that's a strategy to bring back, especially on the double tap, 2d6 worth of Plague Bearers who are now going to have 2 or 3 wounds, could be a worthy addition. Sorceress Shackles is another one that I really like because it's 3 bases. That's 3 opportunities to be giving out your disease tokens, and it's 3 points, as you said, that you can use the bases to deny charges, pile-ins.
Isn't the live swarm D3 heal, and then you can
but when
heal...
when you summon it, you get to double tap the first
but
time.
It's 2d3. So
yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 2d6. Well, and the thing is, so there was another, there was a podcast where they're talking about how great the live swarm is, and that upset me because it used to be great when Plague Bears were 1 wound, and you brought back between 2 and 6, and now you bring back between 0 and 2. So I don't like the live swarm at all, especially if they're on 3 wounds. You have to roll 5s and 6s to bring any of them back, or because you have to get that number of wounds of the model.
Yeah, true. You'd have to you would definitely want to do the Emerald Life Swarm first before you try to boost them up to 3 wounds, because you're right.
That's true.
If they're on, just the sequence
you'd always
order,
do it, but still you get 2 at the most. Before you could get 0. Before it was 2 to 6, so it was a lot better.
I can see where you're coming from that, but Shackles is definitely one that I think is worth looking into.
Yep, it is. I mean, Shackles is amazing. I'm always scared of people trying to block my movement with spells, because I move 4. I mean, I can't. If you put a spell in front of my models and I roll a 3 trying to unbind it, well, I can't move, because that spell's there, and I move 4 inches, and my Great Unclean One's not going to go anywhere, and neither are my Plague Bearers. Maybe they can walk around it if I auto advance them, but.
Yeah, and Sean here mentioning, Burning Head, once you send out the mortal wounds, it automatically dispels, so it means you can keep recasting it later, which is great. The Suffocating Graves Tide, which has those, long bases, can be helpful as well. So there's a lot of good options if you want to build around it. But I think the challenge that you find as a Nurgle player is that you just don't have the points.
Yep.
Like I imagine your lists are probably always over points, and you're always pulling things off because you're over.
Yeah. Before that, I had 1 less beast and a base of Nurglings, and that put me at 1980. So I put the Burning Head, and I tried it for a couple times because the Great Unclean One casts Fleshy Abundance, and then he can cast Shield on himself, and then Be'lakor can do Arcane Bolt, and Feeble Foe, he'll basically never be in range, and when he's in range, the unit's dead anyway. It's never been useful to me, so I'd much rather cast Burning Head. But it also wasn't that useful, and then I stopped playing Nurglings, and I just added a Beast of Nurgle. So, yeah, I stopped.
So here's your Cherokee list. So anyone who has a keen eye noticed that I messed up, and I actually put your second list in. So if you noticed it, good job to you. But we will talk about it. But this is the one that you went 4-1 at the Cherokee Open, and for most people, you probably heard people talking about Plague Bearers. You heard about Puskor Blight Lords, and you hear about Blight Kings. But there is some really solid secret list tech that people like yourself, I know a few other people have been playing around with, and I really like the Beasts of Nurgle, because on the surface, you're like, so what? It can retreat and charge. Whoop-de-doo. But when you start then combining it with all this denial that we've talked about literally for an hour, the value really starts to come out. So the first list, Tobias, you're going to read us through is Be'lakor. You've got a Great Unclean One who has the Flail and Massive Bile Sword. You've got the Nergan Infestation, the Wither Stave, and Fleshy Abundance. You've got a Sloppity Bilepiper. And one thing I'm curious about with the Sloppity is why you've chosen it to be in the list. It seems like a lot of people will default summon Sloppity into the list. You've also got 30 Plague Bearers. You've got 5 units of Beasts of Nurgle. So that's 1985. 2 drops at 137 wounds. And obviously remember, 137 wounds with a 5-up ward.
Yep. So, Okay, a few things. Bellacore, we've already talked about, and I think he's amazing. I think everyone agrees he's a good model anyway. But in Maggotkin, now that I've played him, he's just so good. I can't see myself making a list without him. I've tried to make a lot of lists without him, and then every time I do, I see, well, if I remove these 3 Beasts of Nurgle or whatever and just put Bellacore in there, wouldn't that list be much better? And every time I tell myself, yes, definitely it's better. Bellacore has to be in there. I can't take Bellacore out of there. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't think I can play without Bellacore anymore because he's just so useful in the current meta. Then the Great Unclean one, just the melee one, the one with the bell gives you a little bit extra summoning, but I don't think he actually makes a difference. Like the summoning points that he gives you don't make a difference, and you just do less damage. And I'll talk about why they don't make a difference afterwards. Nergan Infestation, easy, by far the best one, -1 to hit. You just want your Great Unclean one to survive a little bit longer. Wither Stave, honestly, doesn't do that much. It's +1 to the disease rolls. Some games it's done a few extra mortal wounds. Some games it hasn't. I'm thinking about doing the tome or something else but again, the book doesn't have any exciting relics in there. There's some good ones for the mortals, but not for the Great Unclean one. If I had a mortal hero in there, I'd definitely put a relic on him. And then Fleshy Abundance, must have with the Plague Bearers. It's amazing when it goes off. I just feel bad. I just feel bad when a big model goes in there and does absolutely nothing, and because I played Kragnos before I played Bellacore once, and it was literally Kragnos and 6 pigs charging great Plague Bearers, and they fought them for 3 or 4 rounds of combat, and there were some left, and you don't even care, whether you go hot and you kill 8 Plague Bearers or you whiff and you kill 4. I don't care. These aren't worth anything. They're just there for you to stay where you are for a couple of turns, and that's what they do. The Sloppity. So
before we get to Sloppity, I just want to rewind really quickly to the Great Unclean one, because a lot of people disliked the Great Unclean one. They thought the points were too expensive for what it did, and the War Scroll was not as good as what they were expecting for the points. Talk me through why you think the Great Unclean one is a good use of 500 points. It just seems to me that most people are grabbing those 500 odd points and investing them into Maggoth Lords. That seems to be where people have kind of gone, right, well, Great Unclean one isn't as good as what it used to be. I'm lacking damage. I'm going to go Maggoth Lords.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. The best thing about him, honestly, for me, is that Fleshy Abundance. That spell, when it goes off against armies where I need it, is amazing. And some games he does nothing because people avoid him and don't fight him, and he just walks around and he doesn't get anywhere with his four movement and giant base. But in some games he does. I played dragons, and the dragons killed the Plague Bearers, and then the Great Unclean one just walked across the board and killed 5 dragons or something like that. Just his shooting attack is also surprising. I always my command points are I always have plenty because I have nothing good to spend them on. I don't do +1 to hit or +1 to save on Plague Bearers, or I always have command points. So if someone charges me, I unleash shell and I puke on them with the Great Unclean one, and he's killed a dragon in doing that because, again, very swingy, can't count on it, but you never know. That's how everything is here. D6 shots. If you roll a 6, then you hit on 3s, wound on 2s, -3 rend, 2 damage. So that's potentially 12 damage, and that -3 rend. I mean, that's really surprising for some people. And then the other thing is, you get to stomp before the fight, so you might do an extra 4 mortal wounds again, so you can really kill things that charge a Great Unclean one. But to me, I would never play him if I didn't have the 30 Plague Bearers. I mean, he goes with the 30 Plague Bearers, and because he's an awesome model, and I don't really know what else I would put in here. because once I take him out and I put a Maggot Lord in there, then all of a sudden I don't like the Plague Bearers as much as I used to, because yeah.
I would 100% agree with that. Like if you're not going to, you need some things to kind of tie up with the Plague Bearers, and if you were going to take Plague Bearers, you probably would drop them to a unit of 10, maybe 20 at most. But it is a bit. That's 50% of your army. The Great Unclean one with the 30 Plague Bearers is 50% of your army.
Yep. And what I do sometimes, if really something big hits the Plague Bearers and you need to send someone, he's always standing next to them in my deployment. And you need someone to come and hit that thing, whether it's a Maw Crusher or a Kragnos. Well, the Great Unclean one is so slow. But I would literally remove Plague Bearers that are killed in order to, make clear his path so that he has the shortest possible distance to walk over there and get his charge on my turn. So, he's often the guy that walks over there and then just murders whatever Frost Lord or Maw Crusher came and charged the Plague Bearers, and I need to get rid of them. So he does have some uses, and he does shine in some games.
And to Autumn's point, you could always put like the Arcane Tome on a minor hero to get that fleshy abundance. But, obviously the challenge is that, it's not nearly as many wounds, right? So you will lose that eventually, especially if we're in long strikes, sentinels, man skewer bows, bow snakes. So you do play into that if that does happen.
People waste damage on him because they're scared of him. He's big, he's fat, he's there in the middle. He does damage. So long strikes shooting him, I mean, great. They're not going to kill him. Then he's going to heal 2d3, and yeah, he has some uses for sure.
Before you go into Sloppy, one more burning question around the Nurgling Infestation. Now, you obviously get a whole bunch of bonus, like you -1 to hit against the Great Unclean one because of the Infestation. Are you summoning Nurglings to get the extra ability off the back of the Nurgling Infestation, or are you just purely going for the -1 to hit?
No, I summon Beasts of Nurgle 90% of the time.
Okay.
Most games I just summon 4 Beasts of Nurgle and that's it. And the Nurglings don't really do anything. So if I was summoning them, it's because I'm short on points and I have 8 contagion points, and so it's better than nothing on turn 4 or 5.
I was just wondering because there is that extra set of rules. So you get the +1 to hit against, blah blah blah, if there's Nurglings within range. So I wasn't sure if you were tapping into that part of the ability, or you were purely just going for the -1. So that was kind of what I thought you would say, but I thought I did want to call it out for anyone who might be thinking about it. Now, please, Sloppity bile pipe me the whole way. This guy is a turd sandwich. I hate him so much.
Exactly. And I've seen so many people talk about summoning him because GW did this thing where they trick you into thinking that you get good value by summoning him, because he's 130 points and 7 contagion points, right? Whereas the Beast of Nurgle is 110 points and 10 contagion points. How does that make any sense? I'm going to summon him. No. Terrible idea. So first of all, there's some matchups where he's basically useless against shooting armies because, they don't care about piling in, and they can shoot him. If they have a unit that wants to pile in, they'll just shoot him and he's dead. Where you need him is against, again, those super aggressive, super fast melee armies. And against those armies, you need him turn 1. That's when you need him. Not turn 4, they're in melee. Like, if you summon him, even if you have that stupid Great Unclean one with a bell who doesn't do anything, you're still not even guaranteed to get 7 contagion points turn 1. So you might summon him even if that means you're getting the bad Great Unclean one and you're befouling host, and you might still only summon him turn 2 because now you have something on your side of the board, so you only get 6 contagion points. So that means your opponent might have 2 turns before you summon him. Like, the game is over. Again, he's about slowing down the game. I want him turn 1 or I don't want him at all, right? And me being at 1965 wouldn't make a difference, right? Who cares? So I want him turn 1 against some armies so that he has that no pile-in aura. And I'm not going to summon him. I'm not going to wait 2 turns to summon him. Sometimes when he dies, I summon him again on turn 4. But usually when I summon him on turn 4, it's because the Great Unclean one's dead and he's dead, and I need another hero to do heroic actions and summon more stuff. So, I have to summon him from a tree. It's happened a couple times. But yeah, that's what he does. And then he's just amazing. I mean, I think most people know the no pylon is what you use almost all of the time. And then in some instances where there is no pylon and it's just a slugfest, you do the mortal wounds on 6s to wound. And you probably summon the Herald in that case because you have 30 Plague Bearers that are in a slap fest, and you want the extra 6s to hit and the extra 6s to wound, and that's it.
I was going to ask you if that because you're putting Sloppity on the table, does that mean you're bringing in the smallpox Griffinar as a summon instead? Especially because you got the Plague Bearers. Like if you didn't have the Plague Bearers, those Heralds aren't nearly as important. But between Sloppity and the other Heralds, good combinations with the Plague Bearers. But I guess then the other point is if the Great Unclean One's working with the Plague Bearers, it's almost like you're over investing in that part of the board where you've got other parts to consider.
Yeah, I mean the Sloppity. So again, I summon beasts almost all the time. Sometimes the Herald, if I string my Plague Bearers out like a madman because they can't select one to kill, and I just want everything to be touched and everything to die with disease, then I might and they're not going to die quickly. Then I'll have the Herald there, and I'll have the Sloppity, and it'll just be incredibly annoying for my opponent. Once I summoned 10 Plague Bearers because I had the CP and all I cared about is holding an objective and not having it taken away. But otherwise, it's just always beast, beast, beast. So turn 2 and on, I usually summon a Beast of Nurgle every single turn.
Well, let's talk about those beasts. Let's talk about the Beasts of Nurgle, the people that probably, and we'll get to the fly list and we'll talk about some other things. Look, the Plague Bearers are just a tar pit of wounds, whether it's 60 wounds because they don't have fleshy abundance or 90 wounds with fleshy abundance. They did lose a whole bunch of like the olden days where it'd be a unit this size would be -2 to hit, -1 in shooting and combat. It's now just simplified to be a standard -1. But talk to me about these Beasts of Nurgle, because most people would look at that and go, well, Tobias, you mentioned right at the show, you were talking about the fact that Nurgle struggles on the objective. So why wouldn't you have more Plague Bearers? Why wouldn't you have Blight Kings? Why would you put so many points into these one model units?
So the beasts, first of all, they do mortal wounds. Nothing does mortal wound except the stomp from the Great Unclean One, which is amazing. I love it. And the Beast of Nurgle. And it's upfront damage. It's not the mortal wounds from the disease that happen at the end. So if you want to kill something, the Beast of Nurgle can come in and kill it. And they don't get tied up, right? They can just fall back and charge something else next turn. And if you have several units, you might charge in, and the impact is on everything within an inch on a 2-up. So sometimes you get to roll 2 or even 3 dice, right? So they do a deceptive amount of damage in the charge there. And you can charge them on 2 sides of a unit, like make their pylons less efficient, things like that. They're just very versatile. I mean, they're really a good unit after having played with them, and they're worth their 110 points. I still feel, even though I've been doing well, on their own, Nurgle is pointed maybe a little bit on the high side, but in the current meta, it just works so well, tying things up, scoring points, and but the beasts are cool. They're just very versatile, and yeah.
I think some other things to call out is that the fact that they can fly, so it's deceptive. I probably, you can retreat and charge, and the model, well, it doesn't fly, but when it retreats, it counts as if it flies.
Yeah, you literally can't even clear a 25mm base with that. So it helps you.
You don't worry about that?
It helps you, pile out like across a base a little bit, but it almost does nothing because you can't advance when you fall back. So
no, that's correct. Yeah,
so
you can't.
They have a 60mm base, right? So you can't even clear the base of a 25mm model that you would want to move across, and then you would still be. You can't even move across it, and even if you could, you would still be in melee. So it has very little. Yeah,
because you move 5, and if you're trying to maximize the pestilent battering ram and trying to get multiple units in within an inch to do the D3 mortal wounds, you're right. That can then that can be quite tough to then fly over screens and get yourself out. So
the fly doesn't do anything.
That's fair. That's fair. And I guess the other call out as well is that it gives you disease tokens before it retreats potentially on a 4-up. So, overall, it's a great unit. It is 8 wounds, but it is 1 model on the objective, which
2
really puts a lot of... Oh, it counts as 2. Sorry, you're right. Yes. I'm more thinking like it's not 5 or 10 or something.
Yeah.
It's not large.
But it is good. It'll do damage, because if you have 3 beasts fighting something and, 2 of them will fall back again, maybe generating extra disease, and then either charge back in if that unit is worth it, or they'll go charge something else, if that unit was done anyway. And they actually by themselves, they can defeat a lot of those smaller units, objective holders like adjudicators, or what are the liberators and the vindictors, or whatever those new ones are called.
Yeah.
If you get a charge off, you do 3 mortal wounds, you do disease. I always consider them doing 0 damage, but if one of their attack gets through, they do 2 more damage. Kill one. Then there's a couple mortal wounds at the end. Oh, and that unit did 2 wounds to you. You're gonna kill them in a couple turns, and that's it. So they're pretty decent like that.
Yeah, and with the Vindictors, like it's easy to get only 1 or 2 in with Sloppity. Is there anything else you'd want to call out? Because I know you've got a variant on this list that I just want to, give you the time and space to talk about the Glotkin variant. It's similar but different. Before we get into the bug list, is there anything else you want to call out from this particular build?
So again, one thing, my toughest game was against Bone Splitters with Kragnots. So a bunch of pigs. They ran up the board, zoned me off the objectives, right? And pinned me into my deployment zone, which is tough. Is against Calvin Reary. I think he writes some blogs. Yeah. So I played him, and it was a 2-point game at the end, And if I hadn't made a charge, I would have won by a minor victory. At the very end, I had to make an 11-inch charge. Otherwise, it would have been a minor victory, which I have never had one. So that would have been kind of exciting. Anyway, so this list doesn't punch through things very well. So if you just beat me on the objective, you zone me out, and I have to remove your stuff before I can even move onto it, that's going to be tough. So that's why if the meta moves more towards hordes, and again, I was talking about, the 120 zombies, I think this list would struggle. It's very good against an elite meta where the plague bearers can body elite units out on objectives, and Be'lakor can tell a 600-point model to not do anything for a couple of turns. Great, but if you actually have to do wounds, then all of a sudden that Glot King and 10 Blight Kings, would be a lot more helpful. But they would be a lot more vulnerable to long strikes and things like that, which right now I'm not very worried about long strikes. But they might go away with IDK, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I will get your thoughts at some point on Fire Slayers and IDK, and if that changes any of, and even like we had the battle scroll, we had the changes with the only thing that you've got impacted there from the battle scroll would be Be'lakor. But I'll get that towards the once we get through the list, we'll talk about those kind of little wrap up things. The other build that you had that you sent to me it has a lot of similarity to this. You had Be'lakor, but you had the Glotkin. So you had dropped Sloppity and you had dropped the Great Unclean One. So you've got Glotkin and you've got Be'lakor. You've got 10 Blight Kings and then 4 Beasts of Nurgle. So you've dropped on the Beasts of Nurgle. You've dropped the Plague Bearers and the Great Unclean One, but in its place, the Glotkin. How does this list differ by having a Glotkin and the interchange of Blight Kings versus Plague Bearers?
So first of all, I have to give credit as someone that I was chatting with on Messenger that made this list, and I've been building towards it because I'm worried about a shift towards horde meta or more models, and the Blight Kings would really be better than Plague Bearers in that case, even though they are more fragile and more vulnerable to elite elite just fighty units that really punch above their weight. Because even if you do the Glotkin shenanigans and you charge, it's their turn, so they get to fight first. So if you charge Blight Kings into Kragnos, he's still going to do his thing first, But yeah, that list is basically, I think, a little bit less resilient than what I'm running now, but it has more ability to remove models and to shift larger units off an objective. And then the Glotkin has, I mean, that would be a whole other discussion, but there's so many ways you can mess with your opponent in their movement phase with the Glotkin. So, I think you've already talked about that in another video.
Yeah, like the Glotkin and his, like, I always still love the idea of having like a summoned Nurgling base. And, you use the counter charge with the Nurglings to go into someone who had chosen Slayer Warlord, Broken Ranks, and, they're going in for that unit, and you slingshot something in. Yes, the Nurgling's going to die. Yes, the Beast of Nurgle's going to die, whatever you slingshot in. But you've denied them the charge to get into whatever they've buffed up with spells and abilities in order to go slay the Warlord, Broken Rank, whatever it is.
With Be'lakor, what you have to think about, and it would make it worse because on their turn, I mean, you move up to the objectives, and then you tell them on their turn, whatever big unit you have isn't going to do anything. And then you're going to bring your smaller stuff to try to contest the objectives, and I'm going to charge it with my giant 500 and 700 point elite units, right? And
yeah,
so yeah.
I wasn't even going to add that layer of the onion on. Like, that's just like if having the Glotkin and the counter charge ability alone, then you add the Be'lakor to it, and then the 3-up stopping them from doing things. All of a sudden, you've made it a really tough time. But, what I'm loving from this is that you're showing off a whole bunch of ways that if someone wants to run around with the Glotkin, or they want to run with the Maggoth Lord, they want to run their Great Unclean One, they love their Plague Bearers, whatever it is, there's a whole bunch of ways to build your list and build a competitive force, which leads us then to the fly spam, as some people mentioned earlier. But the people, why are Puscoils good? Like, why are flies? Because you've got no bodies. You've got 4, 8, 10, 13 troops plus 2 heroes.
So this list, this is probably a list I would play right now if I had the courage to paint 13 flies, because, God, there's so many different surfaces on them. They're going to take forever. I don't want to do it. But this is the list I want to play. So the flies are similar to Beasts of Nurgle, right? They're faster. They do impact hits. And they can actually do some damage, They're tough. Here you have 125 wounds, so it's a little bit less than the previous list, but you're a lot faster. You do more damage, and you actually have a save, right? And you can make slight variations to this. You can take 2 Puscoils out and put another Lord Affliction in there if you want to, have some backup on your summoning or whatever. But it's basically the same list. And then this list plays Drowned Men, right? So you move your whole army up 16 inches. You're 1-drop this time. And you capture the objectives if they're in the center, and now you charge your opponent. You pin them on their side of the board, and if they have something scary, because again, flies, you can't necessarily kill everything, even though you do mortar wound impact hits. But if they have something scary, you don't even care about that side of the board, because when it's there, you just ignore that. You tie up half of their army and mostly kill it. And then when it's their turn, Be'lakor just points at their Kragnos or Maw Crusher and says, no, just whatever is going on, just let it go on a little bit longer. Nobody go on the objectives, and just, watch this happen. And you're going to have 13 flies with the Lord of Afflictions, such awesome command trait and artifact, the turning off command abilities, and they're just going to murder, the chaff. I mean, and then things like Lumineth and so on. I mean, they're going to hate that list. They're going to hate playing against it. Yeah. So
and they're going to hate it because they just want to do chip damage, right? Like, a lot of the time they're just throwing sheer numbers at you, Because the Puscoil Blight Lords, they've got how many wounds are they each? 6?
No, it's 8. It's 8 for the Lord of Affliction and the Puscles as well, I believe. Let me pull it up so I'm not lying to you right here. Yes, they have 8. So they have 8 wounds each, 4 up save. They have 5 attacks on the guy and then 6 on the fly. So each of them has 11 attacks, right? So you have just your basic guys here. It's 4, 4, 10, 13 of them. So 13 times 11 attacks, right? Plus the impact hits that do mortal wounds, plus the Lord of Afflictions, who also does something, plus Be'lakor, who also moves 14 inches. I mean, you're just gonna go in there and you're gonna clear some chaff. And
how? No, please continue.
Yeah, I mean, to me, right? Again, I'm not playing this list. This is theory. But if I had the models, this is what I would be playing, because to me, this is right now the strongest list I can imagine making myself on Maggotkin, and it just seems disgusting. If you go first, there's so many armies you're just going to block on their side of the board, and you're going to avoid like that big scary thing they have, and they're not going to even be able to punch you back once it's their turn. And then, like they're not going to score. Even if they somehow come back and fight through that, I mean, they're not going to come back and score after that.
How would this list change if it was not the Puscoil Blight Lords, but rather the Plague Drones?
The Plague Drones are, I told you there's maybe a couple units that are a little bit less efficient, and the Plague Drones is one of those units for me. The Plague Drones, unfortunately, they take up more space. If you reinforce them, they're 6 models, which is annoying. Their shooting attack is only 7-inch range, which is one of their, that's one of the worst parts. They don't get the pre-game move that you get in Ground Man, so they just wouldn't function that way. You couldn't do the same list with them.
No. But like for someone who maybe likes more of the Plague Drones as opposed to the blood, and Germ, to your point, the 5-up save certainly doesn't give you as much value.
They're also not as tough.
Correct. They're not as tough. Gravon, how would I make the Nurgling spam with Morbidex work? I would do a similar list to what I would do. I would do a similar list to the first one. Obviously, drop the Great Unclean one, drop the Plague Bearers, drop back a couple of Beasts of Nurgle, but in its place, bring in two of the Maggoth Lords and have a couple of bases of Nurglings that have like maybe 2 units of 6 and a unit of 3 or something. Obviously, you have to play around with points. I'm making this up on the spot, but I'd have, instead of having the Great Unclean one, I'd have both. I'd have is it Horgots, and I'd have Morbidex plus a bunch of Nurgling bases. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that particular question.
Well, I mean, and I sent you a list with one of the Maggoth Lords because, again, I love those models as well, and I think you can make good lists with them. I think they're all decent. What I would do with the Maggoth Lords is that now you can't play the drop game, so you still have to play the drop game, except you want to go up and be like 12, 13, 14 drops. Definitely don't do a battalion because you don't want to lower your drops. You want to put like a couple of trash units out there and see where they deploy everything. But yeah, the Maggoth Lords are good. I would still play Be'lakor because Be'lakor just makes Nurgle. It makes you slow down the game. It works with your game plan so well, and you shut down those things that could kill a Maggoth Lord, and so your Maggoth Lord goes and charges them and things like that. And yeah.
I played a game actually with one of the guys in my Discord server on TTS, and that was literally what he had done. He had a bunch of Nurgling bases supported by Beasts of Nurgle with Sloppity Piper. In the back end was 2 of the Maggoth Lords. And, it was pure control. And I was playing a list that didn't really have a lot of shooting. I went a bit of a conservative build. I just didn't have the tools to get into the Sloppity Piper, and the grind just kept me from being on the objective, and the retreating Beast of Nurgle just kept pinning me in, which was really good because it stopped me from piling in and getting maximum damage from the models that I had. So that's kind of how I would do it. And then because I wasn't doing enough damage, the Nurgling bases would just heal up. So
yeah, you can definitely play that. You can play Horticulous Slimugs And yeah, all the Maggot Lords are pointed well, I think. And yeah, you can make good lists with any of the models that you like in here. And that's definitely one of the strengths for of this book to me.
You had the changes to the battle scroll I mentioned. We talk about this, right? So Nurgle is relatively unaffected. If you look at pure Nurgle, you're not any prime hunters and you're not any priority targets. Now, your list obviously has Be'lakor, which is a priority target. So you would give up an extra victory point, potentially more, against the prime hunter army. But has Battle Scroll changed the way you think about Nurgle, the units you've selected?
No.
Will it change the way that you play on the table? Is probably
No.
the second part of the question.
No, Be'lakor dies because I put him out there, and after he's done his job, people still think he's dangerous somehow. Even they don't realize, because he just did this scary thing, but now he's done, and so I can use him as a distraction counter effects out there and just send him out. He dies. They're gonna get an extra an extra point, but I've never lost a game by a point, so I don't know. It's not gonna matter. I think it's not even gonna matter for armies that. For dragons, I don't think it's going to matter much for 11 dragons, even though you get a bunch of points. I don't see it doing much.
Yeah, I think it's mostly going to make them more aggressive if they haven't already been aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you're giving it away. I think Sean asked a question which I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I like Sean. He's asked, "What about Furies? Would you drop Be'lakor for Furies?" I think we all know the answer there.
No, I mean I have Furies because my plan was I started painting some demons of Tzeentch because my plan was I just want to do all the Chaos demons and I wanted to do Legions of the First Prince, which there I am gonna say maybe this battle scroll is gonna impact it because yeah, you are actually trying to play a slow control game and you're not going to point out that much. So, having a few extra points that you lose on that list might make it, bad enough. Because even the pinks get a freaking point against them. So, yeah, that's rough.
I was going to ask you about Legion of the First Prince because you can, and I'm not going to ask you too much about it, but the great thing as well is you take this list and almost like bring it over to Legion of the First Prince, and because your first list is all demons, there's no problems porting it over. The second list, a little problem because you got the Blight Kings, and the Glotkin, but your demons could obviously jump in pretty quickly, and if you want to have a mixed force with Khorne, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch as well. You can, there's a completely different play style there as well. Still control, but just a very different version of it.
Yeah.
What about Nurgle? Nurgle. What about Fire Slayers and IDK? So they've just gotten their latest books. I won't ask you about Daughters and Nighthawk. We don't know exactly what's coming in just yet, but will that change the way Nurgle interacts on the table, the competitive level, or even the tools you might use in order to deal with IDK and Fire Slayers?
So IDK just seems so strong. So I'm gonna have to play a game and see how that match goes. They seem so strong. So IDK for Nurgle might be a tough matchup because it's probably going to be a tough matchup for everyone. And it'll depend on the list. One thing that I'm going to say: always fight first on the whole army. That is not great against Nurgle because what that's gonna do is that either at the end of the combat phase I'm gonna remove. I don't care that my plague bearers fight or not, right? So I'm gonna remove casualties that either maybe you start your turn and you're not gonna be in range. You're gonna be within 3, but not in melee range where you can actually hit, and you're not gonna be able to pile in. And then your whole army has to activate. I mean, you're gonna fall back, but if you stayed in melee, your whole army would have to activate before I go, which means you do nothing, and now I get to pile in with my units and actually fight you. So that would be terrible. Or if I go first and you're on the fight in again, I would try to make it. Anyway, with the no pile in, it really screws with it. I'm just happy that you have to activate all your units and don't do the damage that you were hoping to do, and then I get to pile in fully, and you don't get any extra attacks, right? So
I was thinking there's two things that works in your favor. One is the no pile-in stuff. So I think against you definitely want to have, even if you don't want to go full demons, I think Sloppity and a couple of tools, whether it's Nurgling bases, Plague Bearers, or a Beast of Nurgle, some of that in any list would be really valuable against Deepkin. The other one would be Forgotten Nightmares, which makes you shoot against a unit that is closest to you. Now, that works in your favor because you have a lot of short-range shooting, and it's normally going into the thing that you want to kill anyway. So it's not like you're trying to... Yeah, but you're not trying to snipe, those things in the backfield, right? So
it's a 7-inch shot, and that's it. That's literally
correct.
all I have right now, yeah.
Which is a big tool of theirs. So, you're not going to be worried nearly as much of that. But I think where that might come in really interesting is what does it do to some of the stronger armies? What's it going to do to dragons? What's it going to do to Stormcast bow snakes?
Exactly.
Lumineth Sentinels, right? You now don't get to choose who you target. So is that now going to drop them from their power level slightly? And is that going to now change the fundamentals of the meta?
Yep, that's exactly right. So IDK will have to see the matchup, and I think Nurgle is probably one of the better armies to play against him because, again, Nurgle isn't trying to do anything fancy. I don't have anything exciting that I'm trying to get off and that you're going to mess up. I'm just trying to find a way of messing up your game, and with all their fancy shenanigans, there's going to be some things that you can screw up for sure, right? Like you choose again a model that can't activate at the wrong moment. Anyway, you're going to be able to do something, and I think Nurgle probably has played into IDK, but the biggest thing is the meta is going to shift around IDK. If there's enough IDK out there, or especially the tournament players that are hoping to go 5-0 or whatever, they're not going to bring long strikes anymore. That's what I think. That's gone. So how is the meta going to change? And it's going to take time because first the long strikes are going to go away, and then people are going to figure out, well, now that the long strikes are gone, what can I bring that I used to not bring anymore? So it's going to take a few months for the meta to evolve just because of that crazy IDK book.
Plus, you're giving away the stuff at the priority targets, and you might see Judicators taking the spot, or you might find that people aren't going all in on their shooting. But either way, it's good to hear. And like Fire Slayers, again, they've got some good counter charging abilities. They've got some good melee. The Rune Sun on Magmadroth, I think, has got some good things in there. But it's a very melee focused army. So I think you can, with your resilience and your adding wounds and all those things, you're probably in a good spot. And they're relatively slow as well, so I don't think them changing too much. Will make Raptors go away? I don't know. I think it depends on how they play out, and I think there's a risk that shooting will be peeled back a little.
And he might be right, because if everything in their army is valuable, if everything's a good target because their army is just good, then that might be true. But if you have to, we'll have to see. I think it'll make them less prevalent.
The other consideration is a general's handbook is likely about 3 months away as well. So what that brings to the table and what that's going to incentivize will obviously change a lot. So I think you'll see an evolving meta, and I think to your point, the next couple of months, you'll see Nurgle really coming into play. But maybe 2 burning questions, and I'll let you go do your thing. What are some of the keys to your victories? Like, you've done well. I'm an aspiring Nurgle player, and I want to get the most out of these limited models on the table. What's the key to my success?
The key to your success, I mean, really, you have to play the long game, like try to make the game, to slow down the game as much as you can. And that's really the key to victory. You want to score. You want to prevent your opponent from doing whatever fancy stuff their army tries to do. And don't fall into these traps. Like I was talking with the Sloppity, don't try to think you're getting a good deal, by summoning him. No, you think about what your game plan is and do what you have to do. Have the tools in place. For me, I dropped Nurglings, for example. That's a good example too, because you can come in the back line, and most people are thinking about the summoning points. And I had a little bit more summoning points, but I had 1 less Beast of Nurgle, which did a lot more for your combat capability. And either way, I was summoning a Beast of Nurgle turn 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then with the Nurglings, I had 8 contagion points at the end of the game. And with the Beast of Nurgle had 0. So that just means you're more effective with your resources. Don't just play your units and see how they work out. I took Nurglings out after 5 or 6 games. For the Sloppity from the beginning, I was like, nope, he stays in there. And then you can use whatever your favorite models are. You can use those and build an army around it. Like there's really a lot of flexibility in this book. Just, pick something and stick with it, because you have to know how the matchup works, the different matchups, because it's not you're going to do this fancy thing and destroy the enemy. You have to know how you're going to interact with your opponent, and that's about it. And so yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that.
No, I dig it. And again, you're going to learn this counterplay over time. So learn your units, test yourself, try to find out what your opponent wants to do. And whether you run Bellicor or no Bellicor, you're great at denying, you're great at taking the punch. Don't overextend yourself. Some generic things that I would normally say. But I think for you, it's very much about denial, especially how you can deny your opponent from scoring their objectives, or their victory points, whether it's through healing, whether it's through bodies, whether it's through resiliency, whether it's through shenanigans like the Glocken, like the Beast of Nurgle, like the Sloppity. You've got enough shenanigans to be able to deny battle tactics. And when you go to a tournament, you're seeing players are focused on getting the 5 out of 5 battle tactics. And it'll be the difference between first, second, third, and anything else. So if you can deny your opponent 1 or 2 of them throughout the game, that can be a huge blow. It can be a huge blow to them, and also, it'll be the difference between you winning and losing.
Yep. And I mean, I really haven't even found the limits of what this list can do. There's some things I'm worried about, and I told you that game against Bone Splitters was tough. But yeah, I'm going to talk about it because I had 1 loss at Cherokee, right? We haven't talked about it. So that was completely on me and the rules, it was not the list. That was actually, for the list, that was one of the easiest matchups, I think. It was against all dragons with Karzai and then a bunch of dragons. And, perfect target for Bellicor. But it was one of those games where I was worried that he was going to hold back for a turn and then just go all in turn 2 because he went first. So I didn't do my Dartmaster ability turn 1 because I was pretty sure I could weather, the charges and then come back. And it was just the terrain rules in AOS aren't the best in my opinion. And there was some broken tall walls that I had hidden models behind. And in our little meta, you can't put a giant, model somewhere where it can't be. But that's how the rules are written. So I thought I had Bellicor and the Sloppity perfectly, protected turn 1. But it ended up being that, well, you can just, a giant dragon that can't land there but can stay there. So Bellicor and Sloppity were dead before I ever activated, right? So then that was kind of game. So, but that was not the list. If I play that game 5 more times, I think, it's one of my easiest matchups. So really, Nurgle, I don't entirely understand why myself, because they don't have anything fancy going on. They're just solid, right? I don't know what the limits of the list is, what they can't do. You just have to go up there, take the objectives, be confident. They're gonna hit you, but it doesn't matter if your plague bearers die, right? If you score the points and they don't, and you have a plan for making that last, then the games just end up going your way. And the prolonged fights, really, that's when disease actually starts adding up, and you don't even realize how the fight's going to go. You charge in there, auto advance your plague bearers 10, then redeploy them 5 when they come up, and then you make your 12-inch charge and touch 6 of their units, because you're like, we'll see how this goes. And then they kill your plague bearers, but it's turn 4 and they haven't scored anything, and you're like, oh, I guess I won the game. And that's just how Nurgle's been playing out for me, and it's been really fun to play.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable playing the long game because it's so easy to predict what happens in the first couple of rounds. But when you're in the grind and you're in that that turn 3 and you burnt you burn an objective and things like that, that's where you really come in your own. And this is where you can bring summoning in and having bodies, especially if your opponent burns an objective you were holding, you can summon on to start reclaiming. And that's where the 7 contagion points, chipping in mortal wounds across the board can really start to pull down those heroes. It can pull down troops, and the slow grind will let you in. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think to your point, it's like just have confidence that you can get in there. Don't be too cagey, because you can take a punch and you'll smile at the end. I always think about Homer Simpson in the boxing match. I don't know if you're a Simpsons fan, but Homer Simpson, when he was a boxer, he got in the ring, he took punches for like that 9 rounds. The fighter was so like lethargic that Homer just like pushes them down and he wins. Like that's how Nurgle looks to me.
Yep, and they do. And then there is a couple. It's not just one play style, right? That fly list is going to play very different, and then the Godkin list is going to be different. So you can have fun with that book, and you can do some different things, and it's a solid book.
Last question, because I'm all about efficiency. Is 2 hours of talking?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. The last question I've got is deployment. Do you have any tactics or advice or tips for me? Again, battle plan and opponent, and there's a lot of considerations that will obviously change it, but any Nurgle deployment advice you'd give to me?
Just put Be'lakor where he can't be shot turn 1, so that you have the option of waiting for that second turn to use his ability, because you don't want to be forced to use it turn 1. And then everything else, you put it where it has to be, because you have 4-inch movement. 4-inch movement on like everything. So, put your plague bearers right in front of the objective you're going to go to, and auto run 6. Put the great unclean one right next to them in front of another objective, and try to roll good on that first advance. Put a beast of Nurgle next to him in case you don't make it to the objective, and then you don't have that much flexibility on deployment. You just have to
deploy on the line. You're just on the line and just
it's on the line.
Go forward.
The only thing is, if they have big threats, again, Kragnos or things like that, try to make it so that, again, you put them in a spot where if you lock them down turn 1, you can mess with their movements if they're trying to get to you. That's sometimes things that I think about. But otherwise, Nurgle, it's easier, because I used to play Tau in 8th edition. Deployment was hell. And then even with ogres, you're fast, so it means you have options. So that means you have choices to make. In Nurgle, you don't have any choices. You just put your stuff where it needs to be, and that's where it goes, and that's what you do. It's easy anyway.
Do you castle up, or will you split out your force, or does it really matter?
No, you don't castle up. You put sometimes you'll put you look at terrain, and if they have fulminators, things that can really hit you, you plan on being places where they can't put their models, where they can't easily get a charge up, but most of the time you just or sometimes you protect your great unclean one a little bit. If again you're playing against Karzai or Kragnos or something that you think might kill him turn 1, you limit the contact that his base could have, things like that. So that you can redeploy him behind plague bearers, or just redeploy the plague bearers a couple inches, and now all of a sudden he can't be charged. I've done that, but it's pretty easy. Deployment's not a big deal with Nurgle. Just don't try to do anything fancy and screw yourself over with your 4-inch movement. If there's player placed terrain, put all the big stuff on the side, because you can't move around it, and it can be used against you. So
we talked about it. Endless spells. We talk about body blocking. I
don't like it, but you got to do what you got to do. Big mountains, they go on the side. Nobody wants to walk around those things.
If people wanted to chat to you more and they want to list teching, are you active in the Facebook page on Maggotkin of Nurgle? Where have you got Twitter? Where can people find you?
Man, no, I'm an old man. I get kids and all that. I don't have Twitter, but I'm on the Facebook. I got Facebook so I could find Warhammer events again. Sign back up. So I'm on the Maggotkin of Nurgle Facebook, and then otherwise we just chat on in smaller communities on Messenger and Discord. But I'm on Facebook on the Nurgle page, for sure.
Cool. And obviously people know that I've got a massive Discord. It's like now 4,000, almost 5. What was it? It's like 4,500 people.
That's too much for me. I was on your Discord, to be honest, but I can't keep up with.
Too big for me.
I don't have that time.
I'm going to sell it to a bank or something and make some money. I don't know. Like, it's too many people. But it's obviously good because there's obviously, we've got Nurgle chats as well. So people are list teching and talking and practicing on Tabletop Simulator. But Tobias, any shout outs you want to make? Any games clubs? Any people that you want to thank? Or
well, I'm just here in my small community in South Carolina, Anderson, right? We have an awesome store over here, Empire Games, where we play most of our games, and then we're halfway between Charlotte and Atlanta. And the Atlanta community is awesome. They have some events. They have a lot of good players there, good people I get to play with. So
you're going to be at Atlantic City Open?
No. The next one I'm going to go to is Gigabytes end of April, a 2-day event there. So we'll see. I'm just going to remember those terrain rules,
Clarify intent's obviously always important, especially with the ambiguity. But Tobias, this was a legend. Thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. I know certainly some people are already kind of claiming it. It was a great, insightful piece. And I think it was great when you consider I've had a couple of other chats on Nurgle, and take what you will. Look at the ideas. Look at how Be'lakor comes into play. Even if you don't take Be'lakor, I think there was a lot of things that was discussed today that would advance your knowledge and your abilities in playing Nurgle. But again, Tobias, thank you so much. Thank you everyone who had joined the stream live. Thank you to everyone who supports on the Patreon. You know who you are because I'm going to play the video now. And thank you all. But Tobias, thank you so much.
Thanks for letting me chat about Warhammer. I love it.
Shout out to your wife or your missus or your sister who's coming in and giving you the water. Shout out to her.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.